Imagine just for a second that everything we know about human history is missing a massive, terrifying chapter. What if, deep down in our collective subconscious, we're suffering from a kind of global amnesia? An amnesia about a time when we weren't actually the apex predators of this planet. Today, in this explainer, we're going to dive into a pretty radical idea that's been hiding in plain sight, scattered across global folklore, weird archaeological anomalies, and fragmented ancient texts. We're talking about a suppressed epoch, a time when humanity was locked in a very real, very physical war with a parallel, colossal species. The researcher Charles Fort once wrote something incredibly chilling. He said, "I think we're property, that something owns this earth, all others warned off." Let that sink in for a moment. It introduces this deeply unsettling possibility. What if the very foundation of human civilization wasn't built on our own triumph, but actually on our subjugation?
So let's open up this suppressed ancient chapter.
When you look across entirely disconnected cultures, we're talking everyone from the ancient Sumerians to Native American tribes, you start to see these startlingly consistent patterns. The source texts blend global footprints of massive anomalous skeletal remains with ancient mythology, and together they point to a forgotten history where giants weren't just some fairy tale metaphor. They were a very real, competing species. These texts suggest a deliberate fragmentation of history designed to cover up a literal, blood-soaked struggle for planetary survival. We're not talking about a peaceful coexistence here, we're looking at a genocidal war for the Earth itself. Which brings us to the ultimate question for our explainer today. Were these ancient giants our enslavers, our equals, or were they actually the enslaved of ancient man? To figure out this bizarre power dynamic, we're going to look at 3 distinct archetypes of ancient giants found in the source material, and we'll start with the ones who allegedly built this whole hierarchy.
Let's look at the first group, the Anunnaki enslavers.
According to ancient Sumerian and Hebrew traditions, the Anunnaki and the Nephilim, well, they weren't exactly human. The texts describe them as extraterrestrial entities, along with their chimerical giant offspring. And the theory they present is mind-bending. It claims these beings literally genetically engineered early humanity. Basically, we were deliberately cultivated just to serve as their labor force. So think about what that means. Early mankind was, for all intents and purposes, just property. We were cultivated to do the heavy lifting for these colossal masters, specifically engineered to work in massive planetary mining operations. The Anunnaki, which some texts actually translate to the righteous ones of the rocket ships, acted as these brutal global overseers. And eventually their iron grip sparked a catastrophic cosmic war for control over both their creations and the planet's resources. The absolute vulnerability of early humans is perfectly captured in this quote from the texts. Human beings appear to be a slave race languishing on an isolated planet, a source of labor for an extraterrestrial civilization. In this first dynamic we're looking at, humans and giants absolutely did not compete for resources as equals. Humans literally were the resource. But, empires rise and fall, right? Even empires run by giants. So we have to ask, did these colossal beings maintain that absolute dominance forever? Or did they eventually degenerate into outcasts? That brings us to our second archetype, the Atlantean laborers. According to the source material, the giants associated with Atlantis and that incredibly massive megalithic city of Tiahuanaco represent a huge shift in the story. These guys went from being the mastermind creators of unbelievable megalithic architecture to somehow falling to the absolute bottom of the social food chain. It's a crazy reversal of fortune. These giants supposedly started out as benevolent kings, literally civilizing smaller men and building these giant, roofless amphitheaters explicitly designed to fit their massive size. But over vast stretches of time, maybe because of shifting gravity or changes in the atmosphere, these giants genetically degraded. They became beings of low principle. And ultimately, they were subjugated by an evolving perfect race of smaller humans who started using them as beasts of burden. The sheer tragedy of that decline is outlined right here in the text. It says, "The human giants and monstrosities were the outcasts of Atlantean society. Frequently of low principle, they were used for the most menial tasks.
The former gods of the ancient world had become the exploited outcasts of Atlantean society. Their status was honestly little better than domesticated animals. The enslavers literally became the enslaved. But obviously, a fragile coexistence like that, this completely flipped hierarchy, it just couldn't last forever. As human populations exploded and the global environment shifted, a new, far more dangerous question emerged. Did ancient giants and ancient man eventually have to compete for the exact same resources? Let's look at the inevitable clash with our third archetype, the Adena competitors. If we look at North America, indigenous oral traditions consistently speak of an invading group of giants. These beings supposedly possessed highly advanced knowledge of weaponry and agriculture. They embedded themselves as an elite, deeply corrupt ruling class over the native tribes. They demanded extreme resources, and they even went so far as to control the rituals surrounding the spiritual death journey.
And here's where it gets really fascinating. The famous mounds and earthworks scattered across the Americas, according to this analysis, those weren't just graves. They were essentially earthen machines, mechanisms of control operated by a dying, desperate elite. As these giants consumed vast, unsustainable amounts of tribal resources, their corruption grew, and the indigenous populations finally reached their breaking point.
And so, humanity fought back. The text lays it out plainly. The legends also relate that over time, the elite rulers became increasingly corrupt. Eventually, the tribes in the Northeast rose up against them and exterminated them. This wasn't just a simple rebellion. It was a coordinated genocidal extermination. It was a literal fight for pure survival. Now, the sources claim this brutal ancient struggle actually left behind tangible artifacts. Take a look at these. On the left, we have accounts of mass graves in Cayuga County, New York, basically the battle casualties of these ancient giant wars. And on the right, you'll see these bizarre religious relics, like this engraved tablet found alongside giant skeletons in West Virginia, hinting at a whole sun-worshipping culture. These are the physical echoes of an entirely slaughtered race. So let's talk about alien minds and motivations. Why did it have to end in absolute, total genocide? To understand that, we have to look past the bones and examine the terrifying inner motivations of the giants themselves. The texts propose a biology that is wildly alien to ours. Think about it. Ancient man was motivated by simple planetary survival, self-defense, and liberation. But the giants? The text suggests they were plagued by fused twin genetics, a horrific mutation from their original genetic engineering. It gave them massive size, sure, but at the cost of profound psychosis and bipolar schizophrenia. They were literally bred for violence. It drove a culture of cannibalism, self-hatred, and perpetual war. They just couldn't survive without dominating and consuming others. Coexistence wasn't just difficult. Biologically, it was impossible.
Which leads us to our final section, Manifested Memories in Stone. Let's quickly trace the suppressed historical pattern we've uncovered today, because the timeline is terrifyingly consistent across all these global myths. First, the giants arrive and engineer humanity. Second, they rule as gods and build these mind-boggling megalithic centers. Third, they biologically degenerate, becoming parasites that just consume human resources. And finally, humans rise up and exterminate them globally to ensure our own survival. This hidden history really demands a profound rethinking of our past. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If we truly slaughtered the giants for our own survival, what exactly are the megaliths we marvel at today? Are they the ruined machines of a fallen alien elite? Or are they just our own panicked, manifested memories? Are they stone monuments, desperately erected by traumatized humans, still trying to appease the dead overlords of a suppressed epoch? It's a lot to think about, and it certainly makes you look at ancient history and human nature itself in a completely new and somewhat terrifying light.